How? How does James Gunn make us feel for characters that we've either never heard of or didn't even know exist and make us root for them? That's my question. Hey there, this is your Mac Doodle Too Much Time on His Hands Doodlemar here with another video. And today, I'd like to talk about Creature Commandos and how it is really good, but it does have a lot of flaws that I do want to talk about. But before I get into it, I do want to say this video does contain spoilers to the entire show. So if you haven't watched it or care about spoilers, please go watch it. It's only 7 episodes, and it's really good at points. But if you have watched the show or don't care about spoilers, let's continue. Now, when I first heard this show was coming out, I was a little skeptical. Mainly for the fact that it literally just seemed like Suicide Squad, but monsters now, as he was describing it. A ragtag team of misfit criminals doing Amanda's dirty work, right? So I got worried. But because it's James Gunn, and James Gunn has not failed us yet, I still had some hope. And then I just waited until the trailer came out, and then I was like, huh, now I'm even more excited. And now I'm even more interested on who these people are, what they're going to be about. Then when the show came out, that's exactly what I got, but there were some issues. See, this show is weirdly in like, it's good, but that's about it. And I'm going to talk about it by what I found the least interesting to what I found the most interesting, like the story itself. The story was basically just the Suicide Squad, but monsters, as I said when I thought this show was being announced. Now, it does have some differences. This version of the team is being led by Rick Flag Sr., mainly because his son died because of the events of Suicide Squad. Now, you may be asking, wait, how? Isn't that Suicide Squad movie based in the old DC universe? Well, that's another thing that I want to talk about. This show was taken during the time that James Gunn didn't know that he was running a whole new universe. But he decided to bring that script in and make an entire new show for this new universe. So anything that was said in the show or pointed out in the show that doesn't like affect what happened in the previous films or projects, like in the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, that is still canon in the show, as they show again with Rick Flag Sr. talking about the fact that his son died and that he is running the Creature Commandos. And we also get to see references from when Amanda Waller's, voiced by the same actress of those films, mentioned stuff from the original projects. Which at times you may be wondering, wouldn't it get a little like annoying because they're talking about previous stuff and wouldn't it be weird? Honestly, not 100%. Because when you just hear it, it's just like oh, that's a cool knowledge. What happened? And if you want to know, you can, go back to the movie and be like, hey, it doesn't really affect the universe, so let's keep going. And that's the thing where I'm like, you know what? That's okay. It's a little weird. But the main thing that I want to talk about that weirds me out, that I think is like the least interesting, is the story. At least the way they structured it. Mainly because in this one, I said Rick Flag is a leader of the Creature Commandos. And I do want to talk about each individual character after this point, because I actually do like them, and I want to talk about their relationship. But he is tasked to protect the princess of this fictional country that I can't remember the name of. And he's basically saving her from Cersei. Now, if you don't know who Cersei is, I barely even know who she was. She is basically a witch from Themyscira, which is cool that we actually got us reference Themyscira. One thing that is funny is that she is trying to kill the princess, but with some incel simp soldiers, which I just find hilarious, and then you don't feel bad for when they die. But the Creature Commandos still eventually stop her, and it's revealed that actually, maybe, that Cersei was there to save the world, because apparently the princess was gonna kill everyone and kill the world's heroes, as they showed a vision of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, a lot of characters that we have seen beforehand and characters that we haven't, in like a grave kind of type thing where everyone's dead. And you know what? Rick Flag is like not believing, mainly because he's been like smashing booties with the princess. And the one that tells them that, Cersei's visions are actually true, this professor that is basically a historian or like someone who researched Themyscira so much, which is still really cool. But then Rick Flag does some digging and finds out that Clayface supposedly killed the professor and switched into her, so it made it look like she actually did this thing. And and I forgot to mention Rick Flag is also accompanied by Eric Frankenstein, which again, I want to talk about each character individually, so I'm not talking about them now. But he basically helps him uncover this thing, and throughout the entire show, we're thinking that the Creature Commandos are going from saving the princess to going to kill her, because that's what Amanda Waller was going with because of the information she got. So this may sound somewhat interesting, but the way the show processes it barely seems important, mainly because at the end of the show, the bride figures out that the princess actually was supposed to be able to cause a World War III type thing and kill all the heroes. The reason that doesn't make any sense is, one, because there was no indication on how powerful she actually will become and why. Because in the vision, it showed Gorilla Grodd that she was with, and that she had all this army that apparently was so powerful that allowed her to do that. But it didn't show at all that the princess had any capability to do that. So it just kind of fell on deaf ears. Like, how is this person able to kill literally the Man of Steel as they put him in a cross? That is weird. They don't even explain that. And then that's really the story, the main story. Now, the reason why I kind of just went through that like really quickly is because the thing that I love about the show is not really the story, it's the characters they put in the story, which now gets me into something I actually really like about the show. The characters. Like, I'm going to talk about each individual character and their origins that caused them to be here, because that's the most interesting part. And there are some things that people have said that weird me out that I'm going to talk about, or things that I don't think James is going to express here. Like, okay, I'm going to talk about the creation of the bride and Eric Frankenstein, because their origin and stuff like that is wild. It's interesting, but they kind of don't do much with it. The whole thing in this version was that the bride was created by Dr. Frankenstein for Eric, the big brute Frankenstein that I said was helping Rick Flag Sr., because apparently Eric Frankenstein is the most whiny ass bitch ever. He is a child. He's a simp. Is James Gunn trying to say something about simps and about people like that? If that is, I applaud you. It's funny. But this is where it gets kind of weird, and I'm not sure if James Gunn's intended this to be uncomfortable, or he just didn't really see anything wrong with it. I'm not sure. I know the show can be really messed up, because it's really not for kids. In the time they showed the bride, they showed Dr. Frankenstein creating her for Eric, right? And like I said, he teaches her how to be a human, how to be a person, all that stuff, you know, like what he technically kind of had to do with Eric. But Eric was a child, basically, and that is his kid, if you think about it. His last name is Frankenstein, like Dr. Frankenstein. So that's already weird. So that would mean that the bride, in this case, would be his child too, right? Well, it seems like it's supposed to be that way, because he teaches her, he's really sweet to her, he's like, you know, enjoying her company. And in the background, Eric is being a whiny little bitch and like cannot handle the kindness and everything, and doesn't understand boundaries. But then this gets weird when we find out that the bride and Dr. Frankenstein were literally doing it together. And I'm like, isn't that your child? That is so messed up. And they don't specify like that's a bad thing exactly. That could just be the way I saw it, but they did show Eric kill Dr. Frankenstein because of that. Which, I mean, would you consider that a good crash out? Because he just saw your supposedly love of your life smashing with your dad and I guess her dad. That is weird. And apparently throughout the years, they've been fighting forever, or at least that Eric has been stalking her and trying to get her for over like 100 years, for like I think more than 100 years, which is insane. But what's funny is that Eric here, yes, he's a simp. Yes, he acts like a child, but he has this weird like vibe of like he's cool. Like he talks about Shakespeare, he talks about movies and love movies and all that stuff. But he's doing it with such like not understanding how these things work, which is so funny. The bride, she is bitter and like depressed mainly because of what happened. Would she understand that she was a victim in this situation? I'm not 100% sure. So that's them. And that is a wild situation. Then we have G.I. Robot. I actually found this guy so cool. Can I call him a guy? He is basically a robot created during World War II to literally kill Nazis, which, you know, automatically makes him 100% win. This guy does nothing wrong. I don't know why he's in prison. I mean, I do in a little bit later, but it doesn't make sense. But he basically, you know, does what he's supposed to do. He kills Nazis and then gets decommissioned and then is being revived by the creator of the Metal Men. Now, if you don't know what they are basically element-based robots. I don't know if that's the best way to explain them. I barely know who they are exactly, but I've heard about them. But he is basically trying to figure out how IG Robot works, because IG Robot seems to have some sentience, but with the main motive to just kill Nazis. So I just find that funny. But because, you know, he's a robot and can live for basically forever, he's just been like tossed around, put in different places and all that stuff. And this one person, you know, finds him and takes care of him like he's a person, which gives me, you know, adoption vibes. And he's like, oh my God, this guy is helping him. He's really sweet. Even though IG Robot is a robot, he doesn't really feel things in reality. but it's really nice. This is where it gets really weird. He basically, the guy that adopts him basically, sends him to a literal Nazi rally. And I'm like, what are you thinking? This robot was created to literally kill Nazis. But I guess it's a commentary on how these type of horrible people get together and think that we're going to take back the name and it's going to be a positive thing. But hey, G.I. Robot does not discriminate from the Germans or from people of the US. He does not discriminate, which, you love, because he kills everyone in that rally and you're like 100% good. But one thing I found hilarious is that the fact that they try to make him have a trial like an actual person, which is hilarious. I'm like, what are you doing? This guy did nothing wrong. These are literally monsters. I don't know. But that's how he got in prison, which I just find really interesting. And also, that just means he's like a good boy. This robot did nothing wrong. He's an amazing creation, and I just love him. Oh, and then we go into Weasel. Now, if you have watched the Suicide Squad movie, it pointed out that in that movie, he had killed, like, I think five kids. I think that's what he said, or 500. I can't remember what he said. But he basically pointed out that Weasel had, like, killed children. Well, in this case, it actually realized that no, Weasel never killed anyone. He was actually trying to, be friends with it. He's basically a dog in this giant man body because he was a person and he was turned into this. I just can't remember exactly how, though. But he was basically befriending these kids, which, how are these kids just out in a playground by themselves? Are they in school? Because the school, from what they were showing, looked completely empty. So how was this even possible? But besides that, he was befriending them, being really sweet, being nice. These kids were not scared of him, which is so sweet, showing the child innocence. And he was so friendly with them. But because some random old man saw Weasel with these kids, assumed he was a menace, and was ready to kill him. But that made everything so much worse. And it caused a fire to happen because kids are dumb. They're by themselves for some apparent reason. And so the kids starts a fire because they got scared of the old man. And police came, and a lot of kids had died from the fire, and Weasel tried to save this one child that, was able to survive, and the police did not care. They saw a monster, and they were ready to shoot on sight, and they did not care for life, which I think is another commentary on the fact that police will just shoot and not care about the life that they're trying to save. At least that's what I got from it. Or they could be doing like they're more afraid than they are ready to help. I don't know. That's the way I saw it, and I guess Weasel has rights more than people, because he gets a trial, or tries to get trials to figure out what happened to him, but he's like an animal. So that's why he's in the Creature Commandos, which is so sad. Weasel did nothing wrong, and he's such a good boy, and the fact that you see his struggle in his head, in whatever consciousness he has, is so sad. So that's Weasel. And then we go into Dr. Phosphorus. I really want to talk about him because I've seen a lot of discourse about him. Because in this version, take note, I actually know almost nothing about how each of these characters were created or introduced. So I'm basically blind here. So with Dr. Phosphorus, in this one, it shows that, he is a guy who's skittish, who's a little anxious, trying to cure cancer. I'm like, oh my God, that's a great thing. You're actually doing wonderful. And he has a wife and kids, and his wife is basically trying to, tell him to be safe and be careful and all that stuff, because he finds himself working with Rupert Thorne, a mob boss, because he needs the money to do stuff like that. But we find out that Rupert Thorne kills his wife and kids and frames them by making them touch the blood and body and move it. That is horrible enough already, right? And the reason why Rupert Thorne did that is because Dr. Phosphorus realized what he was doing and did not want, Rupert Thorne to actually sell it to horrible people. His research, which I think was with radiation, I think. But Rupert Thorne found out and just offed his family, and that was horrible enough. And they basically put him in the reactor that's supposed to have his radiation, and that's how he turned into this glowy neon skeleton. Now, here's one thing I really want to talk about. Because of what happened to him, he kind of went insane. He kind of just stopped caring. So he just went through anything to go get Rupert Thorne. And you know what? This crash out would make so much sense to me normally, right? And people will say, oh my gosh, he did nothing wrong because he killed Rupert Thorne, right? The problem with that statement that I keep seeing from people is the fact that Rupert Thorne was not the only person he killed. He killed people just to get there. And he killed Rupert Thorne's entire family. That is not a reasonable crash out. I understand Rupert Thorne because that's the guy that actually caused him so much grief and actual anger. But he killed children and his wife. That's not a reasonable crash out. And then he just takes over Rupert Thorne's entire operation. He becomes that horrible monster. which is actually kind of an interesting thing because his old life was gone. He just went insane. That's why I think a lot of people like his personality, because he doesn't care anymore. He lost everything he wants. So all that fear, all that anxiety is gone because everything he loved is gone. And so he just lives freely now. I think that's why he became a criminal and became like a pimp type thing, which I did like the dance moves that he did here. That was wild. And all the edits that were made from this part is really good. And one little cameo that I really enjoy is the freaking Batman. That was awesome to see. Yes, I know James Gunn did say that that was like the most they could show of Batman because they were not ready to commit to anything new. And I'm like, you know what? That's fine. But one thing I do love is the fact that now people are starting to realize how powerful Batman is as a human. Because I remember when this episode came out, people were asking if Dr. Phosphorus can do all these cool things, which I do want to talk in a little bit, who can do all these really cool things that they show in the show of, him casually killing people and using his powers in very creative ways. How is this one mere mortal able to stop Dr. Phosphorus? And people were like, oh my god, Batman must be insane and like plot armor galore. And I'm like, that's what I miss about Batman. People's like excitement and interest on like, how did this mere man defeat someone like Dr. Phosphorus? That is awesome to see. That's something I'm actually really interested that James Gunn was able to actually put in literally a scene where Batman barely didn't even move. That's awesome. And that's how Dr. Phosphorus got into the Creature Commandos. And then we have the last Creature Commando here, Nina Missouri. I think that's how you said her name, which is basically like a fish person, kind of like the missing link, I think. I mean, she does remind me of that. But her origin, it's really sad because she had literal breathing problems. She basically had her lungs on the outside of her body, and that caused her to have a really hard breathing problems. And her mom left because she had probably postpartum depression and was ready to end her child because of that, which is horrible. But postpartum does horrible things to you. But the dad, it's an interesting twist to a mad scientist because, yes, he experimented on his daughter, but he did it to save her life because he had her in a metal container to help her breathe the entire time. And it's so sad. You see her trying to exist, trying to be happy, and she's a little girl, so it's hard to watch, right? But he finds a way to basically turn her into a fish person so she can breathe underwater, which I'm not sure that's like a better solution because now she can't breathe at all in air. I mean, in water, I guess that's better. I have no idea. But she basically has to go through life like that. And I guess that was like her life, and it was not considered great at all because the school she went to, everyone was horrible. That's one thing I do want to talk about, like, real quick. Every time they show like someone's life, they show it as completely terrible, right? But if you go to school, if you go to a place like that or been there, I've been bullied like hell when I was younger. But being bullied like that seems a little too cruel, if that makes sense. Because in the show when she was like little and then was a teenager, they were making fun of her like completely, and no one was nice to her at all. I'm like, no one would be like at least somewhat nice to her. This world has shown that there are so many people with superpowers and like exist like that for many years. So why are there just so many bad people? I would really like to know. This is what makes it sad, because she left home because of all the horrible things that she was gone through. And she basically says goodbye to her dad and basically lives like an animal in like the lake. But James Gunn, Jesus Christ, why do you have to give us shots like this? Damn. But it's sad because she lives like a literal monster now, which I guess Creature Commandos. But people take pictures of her like the Loch Ness Monster, and they basically try to kidnap her, and her dad is there to try to save her. And I love the dad so much because, again, he was a good change of like this crazy scientist. And he didn't sleep with his daughter, but he got shot in the crossfire because they literally just took her to prison for absolutely no reason. Nina did nothing wrong, and that sucks. And I guess that's why she's actually a good person in prison, because she did not belong there at all. She just looked that way, which makes no sense. Because again, this is a world where there are so many superpowered beings. So why did she get put in prison? That doesn't make any sense to me. That's my question about that. Like, they seem to make it where like the world is cruel, right? But how? If they have shown that there are many humans in this show. But that's basically every one of the Creature Commandos that I wanted to go in depth with their origin, because that was the most interesting part, as I said. The main story was not that interesting. Each episode was more of an in-depth look into each character and how they got into prison and how they became the way they did, which was more interesting than the actual plot, because again, the plot did not really make sense to me at all, because the plot was kind of okay and at worst not that great. But that's something I noticed about James Gunn. He can do really good story when he wants to, but his best strength is character development, showing how people act with each other and how people react to each other and get better. Like, there are some relationships here that I just really liked, like the bride and Nina, also with Nina and GI. Oh my god, the way Nina gave so much respect and appreciation to GI Robot, just even though he was like, a robot that doesn't understand stuff, was so sweet and so sad when GI Robot, died doing the thing he loved doing. And then the relationship between the bride and Nina was so sweet because Nina is just a regular person. Yes, she has these fish abilities which don't do anything really. They don't really do anything with that. But it showed how, the bride, who couldn't make friends because of Eric's constant stalking and harassment and all that stuff, basically made her really, bitter and, resentful. And that was, a good way of showing someone who just kind of does bring out the best in people. Which then they kind of suck it out because they just kill Nina at the end. And that was her origin story episode. So it didn't really make sense to me because they seemed like, it's going to be a big deal on why she's the way she is. Maybe her fish abilities are actually going to come in handy. No, she does one thing that the bride basically coerced her to do, to kill the princess, because they were ordered by Amanda to kill the princess when they thought that, she was actually a threat. Which then later, they find out she was a threat. But that's what I mean. It was weird. They kind of wasted Nina with this last episode. And maybe that was the point. Maybe it was to show that sometimes nothing can be that satisfying. Because the bride eventually does kill the princess because of what the princess did to Nina and how much that was the only good person. And that's the stuff that really gets me and makes me really excited. This may be me just ranting about stuff or really praising the show in a really weird back and forth, but that's how I really felt about the show. I wasn't 100% sure how to even review this show because there was a lot of ups and downs, and I was like, oh my god, I could talk about everything. But then when I really thought about it, I was more like, there are things I really like about it, but it's nothing to do with the story, because the story is very convoluted if you really think about it, and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, how does the princess get enough power to kill a lot of strong metahumans? How she even got with Gra in the first place? That doesn't make any sense. The reason I say that is because the army they showed here looks really powerful, looks like that. But the entire show, they just treated them like cannon fodder. They all can get blasted by their own armor and destroyed very easily. So I'm like, how did this lady with her army even get the chance to even go through supervillains? I don't know. That was weird. Now, I do want to say one thing that I think everyone will say. The animation here and the voice acting was so awesome. That is something that saved every little moment. Every time you got to see cool fight scenes and action, that was the things I really liked, especially with Dr. Phosphorus. With his powers and his abilities, that was a really fun thing to see. And the voice acting was actually really surprising, because a lot of these voices aren't voice actors. They're regular physical actors, so that got me worried. But the main one that comes to mind is the actress who plays Amanda Waller is really great, even in animation. She's not stiff, she's not anything like that. Or the actor who played Rick Flag Sr., really good. And I mainly know him from Captain America Civil War, at least that guy. And I think I want to talk about the actor who played Eric Frankenstein. Oh my god, the way he played him and made you very confused. I'm like, oh my god, he's such a suave guy, he's a really cool guy. And then make him act like a complete simp at the same time is hilarious. So these are things that I'm really it's a good show, but I can't really say anything else about it. That's why I went in depth about each character and why I like them, because James Gunn is really good at making their characters really in depth, but the story was kind of just lacking to me. But hey, those are just my thoughts on the entire episodes. What did you think? Did you like the entire show? Were there parts where you were a little worried like me, or did you just not like the show at all? I would really like to know all your opinions. But if there's nothing else, this has been Dynamite. I hope everyone stays nerdy, and I hope to see everyone in the next video. Bye!